everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we are this is our 760 episode, and this episode is very very important. Country like Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, all of the emerging economy, their major problem is transportations. We have lot of traffic jams. We waste lot of our time in the roads. Uh, Huge problem. Everybody suffering for these transportation issues. That's why World Talent Economy Forum collaborate with Transit X. We want to solve this massive problem of India, of Bangladesh, and many other countries. And they have a very very exclusive technology which may be very very helpful for emerging economy. Besides that, they are very much committed about uh, investment of emerging economy. That's why Mr. Mike is very helpful for the emerging economy, and we already discussed this issue with the Prime Minister Office of Bangladesh, India, and they come up with a positive response. And we are doing our necessary feasibility study and research work, and hopefully we will execute this kind of technology in Ahmedabad, in Dhaka, in Lakhimpur, in Chittagong, and few other cities, and we can solve this problem. Mr. Mike, from emerging economy perspective, our major challenge, understanding the technology. If you ask me, what is the major challenge? Those who take the decision, the policymaker, they are not able to take the decisions. So how you want to help us? Because now a lot of technology is coming, electric vehicle, autonomous vehicle, lot of things. So how your technology gonna helpful for emerging economy?
Yeah, I thought this was about the future of public transit. What is this? Or are we going to get to there, or sort of what's our main? I mean, I could certainly talk
Definitely,
about.
it's a future. Let's say when we execute your technology, definitely we have to think about the future. What will happen next 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would start out with like, okay, what are the challenges that we now face with public transit? And congestion is certainly not limited to the developing world. I mean, people complain all the time in the U.S. and every country. In fact, this is kind of interesting. I was looking at the list of the top cities with the best public transit. So they're considered the cities with the best public transit in the world. Okay. Then I also looked at the cities with the worst congestion in the world. And it turns out there's basically a high overlap between those two. So there's no evidence that I've seen that great public transit leads to no congestion. So that's kind of interesting. And then I just see, there's lots of issues that people are. I mean, public transit around the world, most of them is just buses if they're lucky. Most of it is private automobiles. Even in the U.S., it's only about 1% of trips taken in the United States are on public transit of any type. So there's there's a bunch of issues with the very high cost of building public transit. It's people are addicted to cars. We really have a single. We have a monoculture, not multimodal, but we have a single mode of cars. And I think it's interesting to kind of look at like, well, why is that? Is because do people ever want to give up what they've been used to in a car? And public transit has taken a real hit when you look at the from the pandemic and trying to get back to even a fraction of what it was in the before the pandemic. So, I've been working on transit, but before I talk about anything about Transit X, I'd like to have other people's thoughts on public transit, where it is now, some of the challenges and things that they've seen too, and then maybe circle back around. Is that okay?
Mhm. Thank you, Madam Fiba. You are also very good friend for emerging economy because
Mhm.
climate is also.
Yeah.
What do you think about future of public transportation, and what's your opinion?
Well, I think that the private convenience of the vehicle is probably one of the biggest head-to-head issues going against public transportation anywhere. And, as long as we're allowing people to basically, the majority have a majority opportunity to drive alone in their vehicles, we're playing a losing game when it comes to the emissions that are associated with public transportation. And so the private convenience, I think what's interesting, I was just introduced to TransitX's technology, and I'll just mention this briefly. The feel that I get for that is that there is, some strength in meeting the private preferential desires of drivers with something that feels like a gondola going through the city. And the reason I say that is, when you get up on a ski hill and you're moving around the ski hill, it's actually very, very convenient once all that infrastructure is in place. So I think it's very interesting that the private convenience may be addressed by something like that, which is very fascinating, and I'd like to learn more about it. Other public transit, like buses, for example, in the city of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, they have buses running every 4 minutes everywhere. And it's very convenient to, stand at the bus stop and then be picked up very quickly, no waiting. So that goes a long way in addressing convenience as well too, especially if there's good penetration of the bus routes throughout the city. So some of the municipalities have addressed their issues, and others, like the city of Kamloops, where I'm from, is a sprawling community. So the bus routes have to be a little bit more guarded in where they go. So, there are some individuality issues that are still not fully addressed by the ordinary bus routes. But the other thing that is also added in here is what's called handy darts, which are smaller book in advance, custom trip buses that are small that can go around and take you to the doctor's appointment and this sort of thing. And they seem to be solving a fairly substantive issue as well, especially for people with accessibility issues. So accessibility issues would be one thing that I would love to hear how Mike addresses it, and also how David addresses it. So that's my initial comment starting out, Sharif.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what do you want to discuss about future of public transportation?
Sharif, thank you so much for letting me be part of this broadcast today. If you begin to look at the future of transportation, we're in one of the most exciting times I've seen since the invention of the internal engine and wheels, really, when you begin to look at it. Right now, transportation innovation is just happening at really a unprecedented pace when I look back over the past. We see driverless cars, we see unmanned deliveries, we see smart cities being integrated into it, and we're seeing a lot of new technologies being put in place to provide not only a safe and reliable transportation system that helps people that reach more economic opportunities. We're also seeing transportation systems evolve to where they also understand their part in the greater world, such as beginning to look at sustainability and other types of issues such as that. And so really, we're at the early stages of entering a transportation landscape that's rich with possibility and challenges, and we're going to see just so many opportunities there that it just boggles my mind. So let me just take a second and kind of go back and say that if I look at this, really, the future of particularly public transportation, but transportation in general, it's going to be one which we see new approaches supersede old approaches as we're going forward. So we see things like autonomous cars. Autonomous cars is one of the big views going forward in the future because it's an era that's not only limited autonomous cars, but it's actually one that goes much broader to that as we see how that same concept is going to be used across many areas of transportation from deliveries to not only delivery trucks and cars, but autonomous drones. We're even seeing small airplanes being made that are autonomous that we're going forward and different types of transportation like that. So let me just talk really briefly about what I think are some of the top five that is going to be the future of this transportation. As I said, autonomous cars is one of those. And we talk often on your program, Sharif, about everything in the world has become digital. Everything in the world has become connected. And that is driving technologies that let autonomous cars happen, such as artificial intelligence, sensors, Internet of Things, LiDAR, different vision systems. And it really has taken the concept of an autonomous car from a vision to where we're seeing trial runs of this being used every day and in many places being used consistently. I'm in Austin and we have South by Southwest going on right now. And there are three different companies that have totally autonomous cars, which they're demonstrating as part of South by Southwest. And so I've had the opportunity to ride in two of the different ones. And yes, it is different to be sitting in a seat and have no one driving but the car itself. But it really is one of the places where we're going to see changes. And it's not just going to be um, for people doing things, but think of the services and the other industries can take. Think about this and be able to deal with people with disabilities, people who cannot drive today, and how this type of technology will make that transportation accessible to a lot larger group. But the autonomous cars actually take you back to another one of the transportation technologies that I think particularly in the public side, is really changing it. Is we see ride sharing cars, ride sharing bicycles, ride sharing scooters, all this different type of ride sharing that looks at how transportation has really been able to change to different forms. Then it sees that it doesn't work in the way. You know, we see areas to do things where the transportation is changing. I normally used to drive my car everywhere, and we had the parking to go with it, burning the gas, all of that, and a lot more people on the road. Uh, I have changed and I'm using ride sharing services for a lot of that now, where I don't have to worry about parking. I don't have to worry about paying $50 to park the car to go to an event and others like that. And we're seeing it there. So it's also not just moving people, but it's delivering materials. Um, my son had I have an adopted son who has some vision issues and cannot drive. So he has not only rideshare service to him, but he has food, he has groceries and other things delivered to him by using the sharing services all the time. So that's a second area of it. We're also seeing the reemergence of a future trend of futuristic subways. You know, even though a lot of people do not like him, we see Elon Musk with his Boring Company beginning to construct a lot of new subway systems and going. And we're seeing it in Los Angeles. We've seen him install a new subway, a limited system in Las Vegas. He's doing it here in Austin, Texas. And he's going to be able to trans people in either pods at speeds up to over 150 miles an hour. He's working on it so that he's developing pods where even people's own cars can now go into these futuristic subways and be used. The other trend that I see in public transportation is we're seeing more and more development globally of Hyperloop technology. And it really is a seal tube or system of tubes which a pod may travel free of air resistant. And you see some like Hyperloop One, which is one of the large companies developing this. And this is a system that would allow people to travel into at speeds above 600 miles an hour and begin to use. The other one, which is really exciting to me, and I'm seeing the first ones of these actually put in place, is the concept of flying taxis. And flying taxis, like I said, not just for people, but for delivering materials, developing medical supplies, and others. Companies like Uber, Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, many of them have also done a lot of work and deployment in this area. In the United States, NASA is actually has multiple projects working on this and trying to implement, and it's leading to advances in, for example, in aerospace management system with computer modeling, simulation, and digital twins and other things like that. But all five of these combine to create a transportation system of the future that will be very, very different than what we've had the last several hundred years. And Sharif, I think that's a pretty good entry on my part to start.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, Professor David Smith bring different interesting discussions for future of public transportation. Do you want to defend? Do you want to share your
Yeah.
views on behalf of Transit X?
He's sort of set me up to knock all this hype down, because reality is that I think he's reading too much into press releases about these companies. You know, we've spent over $100 billion to try to do autonomous vehicles, and they still don't even have a business model that makes them work. Hyperloop was started, 9 years ago. There's been 500 different teams trying to do it, 5 commercial entities, and nobody's even gotten a system that goes over 30% of the rated top speed. Elon Musk made a trivial little tunnel on private property that doesn't really handle the capacity. It's a 1-lane tunnel, doesn't really go to very many places. Autonomous vehicles don't solve the energy efficiency. They don't solve the congestion. Ride sharing is a small, very, very small piece. So, look, I understand that everyone is kind of reads the same articles and says, okay, yes, the future is multimodal. We're going to have all these things of flying cars and flying. No, you won't, because if you look at the cost, look at the safety, look at the capacity. You need to have cost, capacity, and convenience. And I could take each one of these and just say, like, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. It's not. What we have is a system now that would work, except if the cars are too destructive to the environment and they're too low capacity. But what we have is a single mode system. We don't have multimodal. It's a multimodal mess. Nobody wants to transfer out from one mode to another mode. They want to have the same mode going, origin to destination in a private party. So when we looked at this the situation, we said, well, what's the most efficient way to create a high capacity, low cost, extremely safe system, and that you could take away the mode share and give people what they love about a car, but without all the negative and all the negatives associated with it, the cost and the congestion and the safety issues and so many things. And that's what we've done at Transit X. Essentially, we've said that the future is shared autonomous electric vehicles, but they're not what you're thinking of. They're not on the roadway. we create our own infrastructure. And it turns out that when you create your own infrastructure, you can optimize the vehicle. And so our pods are literally, 150 pounds, not 4,000 or 6,000. They're not 3 tons. They're 60 kilograms. So that's what I see is that it's not about multimodal. Multimodal has failed and will continue to fail. You can't do it with large vehicles because large capacity vehicles have to stop and start. And so they're going to be naturally slow. They have to go to end in order to get the capacity. And so, for example, I was even looking at British Columbia in Vancouver. Even with their great system, they're less than 50%. They're about 40%, 44% is public transit. And the problem is when your buses go every 4 minutes, it means most of the buses are empty. So you have a huge issue with the existing systems because it's not efficient, it's not sustainable, it doesn't help congestion. There's still big congestion. So that's what I see is that we are going to have a single mode solution and put it over entire network. So I look at sort of the history. Look how elevators changed the landscape of cities. That when you had the advent of automated elevators, now you could have vertical ascent and very efficient, right? So we had very efficient ways of vertically ascending buildings. And what's interesting is the top of the building was always where the poor people were. But now with the advent of the elevators, the top is where all the rich people want to be in the penthouse. So it really changed. It actually inverted the entire social structure of cities with that technology. And what we're doing at TransitX is something similar. So now we say like, okay, the bad areas of town are right next to the highway because it's noisy and it's polluted and it's visibly just a mess. I think it's the exact opposite. Now when you have podways going along, they're quiet and you have green space. So the most desirable places will now be some of the worst places that you now think of, like across the train tracks and across the highways and all these nasty, quote, nasty places will now be the most livable places in the world to live. So I look forward to that. And that's what we're doing. We're making green, walkable, safe, quiet cities.
Excellent. Madam Viba, in terms of climate impact, I'm just sharing my view. In Dhaka or in Kolkata or this kind of cities, it has many old buses, which actually create problem for climate change. It's actually pollute the weather and everything. So what do you think? If we consider this kind of old transportation system, it may causes climate damage or this kind of technology can help us?
Yeah, this type of technology can, because, one of the things that you see with TransitX, for example, is materials. The materials is a lot lower. The only question that I have hanging for Mike about having them in Canada is what kind of heating, because we are, of course, colder. But let me just continue here with the older buses, as you're saying, and the inefficiency where systems that are running consistently have empty infrastructure happening. That's a lot of sunk cost on humanity for metals, is sunk cost on air quality, which cities are having a terrible time with. Air quality alone, not even just the climate. They're inextricably entwined, and if you can solve both of those, you do create a major upgrade on many fronts. I'm giving a slide presentation on all of the health damage that hydroxyl protects from people from. And when you have something like a TransitX infrastructure where you're not tapping the air quality, the hydroxyl can be working in the environment at normal levels and give you your air quality upgrade, which is very important for the health of all biological life. That's plants, soil bacteria, animals, all lung-bearing species. So it is a very important, fact that a lot of the cities that you're talking about, Sharif, people are walking around with masks that they think are protecting them, but they are only doing a very minor amount of protection for their health. It's really it's an emergency, frankly.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, are you with me?
I am.
Yes, Professor David Smith, when we're discussing about emerging economy, that time impact investment also playing a major role to bring this kind of technology, what Viva introduced, what Transit X, Mr. Mike introduced. So how the emerging economy can collaborate with G20 or USA or North America and can bring more new technology and finance for solving this kind of complex problem.
Well, you're exactly correct that this is a process that's going to take time and to be able to implement that way. Um, in that we're beginning to see more and more monies being allocated, for example, out of COP and others. But I do want to take a little bit of a comment on a couple of the things. For example, in buses, at least where I live, what has happened with our buses is the majority of our buses have either gone to electric buses or we now have natural gas and hydrogen buses running here. So we're moving away from the petroleum, the diesel, the gasoline type of buses to be able to affect some of that changes. And right
You're breaking up.
process continue to enhance, I believe.
Is anybody else
Professor
able to
David
hear him?
Smith, are you,
I can't hear him either.
Maybe we'll come back to him.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I mean,
Mike.
I'd like to respond to a couple of questions Viva had
Well,
asked.
well, Mike, let me just finish one last thing because I am going to have to get off in just a couple of minutes, and I apologize for that. In that, what we're also seeing as we look at this future is it's a time of transition. You have something called multiple substitutions, and we have multiple substitutions going on at the same time. For example,
Yeah, we lost him.
We lost him again.
so okay, these type of changes are not ones that happen overnight, but they're ones that happen over time, and that's what we're going to see with the future of transportation. Is we're going to see these types of changes happening as we transition to the new technologies, and it will not happen all at once, but we have to begin to make some steps in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've described exactly the opposite. Exactly opposite my perspective, because these are network effects, and it's kind of like when so on a per city basis, when you have it where you can mass produce your infrastructure, and you can have it where you can have a small crew be able to put up 1 kilometer a day. Now you can put 2,000 kilometers of infrastructure in a city within 12 months. So it's not over time. It's actually a very fast transition, and it's only based on the financing and the economics and the manufacturability. Because the installation, it's kind of like putting up a skyscraper. How long does it take to put up a skyscraper? Think, oh my God, there's 100 stories. How are we going to do this? It's like, well, it goes up in about a year to 18 months, and that's the nature of the beast. Is that you scale and you do it because if you're privately financing it, you can't finance the interest costs. You need to be able to start to generate. So you're going to hire the number of people that it takes in order to have our construction period is 12 months. And that's full coverage around a whole metro area. So the speed will be very quick. Now, if I get back to Viva, so one, all the pods, they are accessibility. So not only if you're accessible physical, but mental, cultural, language, anything. So even if you don't have the right currency, even if you don't have, so works for everyone. And the other was the, I think you had mentioned the heating. Yes, and depending upon the environment, because we don't have to build cars that work in any environment, because we're building the pods that are working for a specific locality. So it means that you may not need the high capacity air conditioning system that you need in Florida, but you're going to need heated seats and heated. So we actually have an advantage over a lot of the infrastructures, that we only have to incur the costs for a particular region in which the vehicles are and the system is operating.
So what about medical emergencies? So if somebody has a medical emergency in transit, and I was a paramedic for 10 years, so I'm curious, what do you have protocols in place for that?
Yes, there's a button that says there's an emergency. You have audio and video that says I need help. Then somebody's immediately on, says, well, how can I help you? It's like, I'm bringing you to the hospital. I'm bringing you to a first responder. So yes, more than any other transportation system, it is ideal for getting people to the help that they need very quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, when we discuss about technology, when we discuss about like finance, I'm more concerned about people's safety and security, because at present situation, I know many of the people died on the road because of road accident. So your pod is safe for these people. So what do you want to
Well,
share?
let's compare it. So commercial airlines is one of the safest transportation modes that's out there. So by far, right? It's literally 100,000 times safer than the roadways, 100,000 times on a per passenger kilometer basis, right? So, and if you look at all the instances of the car, even with autonomous vehicles, even the best cases that are looking at, okay, maybe we can improve it 10 times, but there's a lot of cases where like it's going to be worse than that. And there's going to be problems where, a hacker is going to come in and change the algorithm to say, don't try to avoid people, but try to hit them. And you're going to have, 50,000 cars around the world actively trying to kill somebody, right? This is what the future will hold. Maybe it's a little bit dystopian, but it's not. We've seen it before. We've seen hackers and cyber attacks being able to do this. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. And so when you look at the pods, I look at them as like, let's take a pretty grim view. Let's say you wanted to commit suicide. Can you do it in a car? Yes. Can you do it in a bus? Yeah, you can jump in front of it. Can you do it on a train? Yeah, you can jump in front. Have you ever tried to commit suicide by elevator? Like, imagine that. Like, imagine you wanted to commit suicide, and could you actually use an elevator to accomplish your goals? The elevator is so safe that you can't even kill yourself, even if you wanted to. So think of that as for the model for pods, that maybe we avoid the suicide thing, and we just go for commercial airlines, that we're planning to be 100,000 times safer than the roadways. So instead of 40,000, so there's 1.3 million people per year that die on the roadways, and over 130 million injuries on the roadway. So that would approximately be like zero on on an off year. You might have a few. So that's what we're talking about when we say safe. Is we look at the existing transportation system as like, well, think of it like you're a mother in 10 years trying to describe to your son, is like, Mom, what's a crash? Like you're trying to describe a fax machine or a rotary phone. You're like, you would have no concept of the notion of what a crash is. And then you say like, well, it's when people used to drive cars where people were, and they're like, oh my God, oh, my God, sounds terrible. How did you guys survive? So that's what I'm talking about for safety.
I think Mr. Daniel has some important guideline and advice and idea. So if you have any other question, especially from audience, you can ask Mr. Mike and to
Yeah.
Madam Viva, what you want to discuss.
I wanted to also talk about the carbon footprint change, because I think that the pods completely change the carbon footprint landscape and actually create carbon negative environments. And I'm hoping that, like one of the things we know about the municipalities is we took a look at, offering hydroxyl dispersal into the municipalities because the air quality is so bad. But we know that because of churning and developments like Mike's, that our assets are better pledged for the global dispersal treatment rather than distributing it into municipalities that are going to change the way they do things anyhow. So when you have increased biomass because the roads are changed to a green space, you have carbon soil uptake, you have a tree population that is offsetting the carbon. We have cities that now have determined their emissions gaps, their historical residual carbon emissions that they're trying to purchase. And so they need, if you can give them those figures, which I'm sure you've had a look at for sure, it would be really interesting to hear how you've approached that.
Mhm.
Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dan has few idea. Mr. Mike, you want to like comments on
Yeah,
this? Number one
so
idea.
using air taxis for transporting for emergencies. Is that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the trouble with air taxis, not only are they loud and they would make the sirens seem like a quaint, quiet with the noise level. Plus, there's the space to land. There's no space to land anywhere. So yes, you could create a helipad on the top of a hospital. They already have them, and yes, you can. They have it now where you can go down, but you still have. It's still costly. It's still unsafe. And it's still low capacity. And so it's actually much slower than just taking a pod, because if you're taking a pod at 72 kilometers an hour, that's actually faster than trying to dispatch an air taxi to pick somebody up. So I look at it as like, yeah, there's a lot of things, including emergency response, where the podway is superior to any other way of doing it, whether it's ambulance or sky taxi or anything else.
Can the pods pass each other in transit?
Well, the network is going always the same speed at a given area, and that your stops are always offline. So it's like a car pulling over, like an Uber, right? So a car pulls over to let somebody out, and the pods are going by. So the pods are going nonstop at 72 kilometers an hour. So.
Okay. So the carbon footprint, the carbon accounting, have you actually added that into your business case?
Yeah, it's a relatively minor piece of that.
Yeah.
So it's maybe like 10% of the revenue is from like carbon, negative carbon, or sort of the carbon credits for doing this. But I think the other benefits are a lot higher. But yeah, it's about the same as like advertising. It helps, but it's not a financial mover. Just
Have you
people being. Go ahead.
Have you had any stress measurement indications for people, for users, for their not only their convenient, but the lowering of the stress that's associated with private vehicle use? Are there any metrics that you're using for that?
Only just anecdotal, in that you have road rage, you have you just the stress levels that are well known, and you would get about probably less stress than when you're in an elevator. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. So you're not improving not only the air quality, but just the, am I going to be late to work? In the pod, you're like, okay, I'm going to arrive there in 8 minutes and 23 seconds, and I'll be there 30 seconds early, because that's what you do, right? You don't say like, okay, I need to leave to make sure I get there 20 minutes early to be on time. You know exactly when you're going to be there, and you know exactly when you're going to. It's just the fun is kind of taken out of. You wouldn't be able to say, oh my God, the traffic was so bad, I'm late. It's like, no. I know that you take the pod, so there's no possible way that you can say that there's congestion. It'll take away some good excuses that people have. So
another item that we experience with the first responders is mass casualty incidents. So on a train, having a train crash and having more than 6 casualties at once. Have you looked at any of your situations in terms of, moving people and, that sort of area, mass casualties?
Yeah, you don't have mass casualties if you don't have any mass transit vehicles. So if you don't have anything that can crash in one fell swoop, if you don't have a big plane that can crash or a big train that can derail, then you eliminate mass casualty events.
What about seismic? The seismic standards, I guess you gear them towards wherever you're building, eh? So your towers are very, very well engineered. And what kind of materials go into the towers?
Usually they're steel posts, and you have the stainless steel cladding around a carbon fiber core for the horizontal members, the beams.
Mm-hmm. So as end of life, if you ever took them down, how recyclable are the materials?
Our goal is 100%, and also our infrastructure is for 100 years. So I hope humanity lasts for 100 years. Our infrastructure will, and hopefully humanity will as well. So the end of life is actually not as big of an issue when you're 100 years. It's like,
Yeah, I think we're going to squeak by somehow with all the various solutions, for carbon removal, and hopefully ours gets scaled as well too, and takes everything out simultaneously. So I see that we've lost Sharif, and I don't have many other questions about the public transit. I think everybody really realizes that we have a lot of problems that I see you have a great number of answers for with this type of technology. I think you've got something incredibly disruptive and very constructive all rolled into one. And so can you tell us maybe how many more customers you're getting and what kind of traction you're working on with your company?
Yeah, no, we're expecting. Well, we have commitments on financing for about 30 billion in projects just this year, and we'll so large financing events. And it's funny you say that. So we call a little bit jokingly is that this is really weapons of mass construction. That's what we're doing. That's the impact that it has, is like weapons of mass construction. That's. The potential is there. I mean, it could affect the U.S.'s policy for Africa and how you build out infrastructure. There's so many implications that it has positively around the world. It's disturbing on how many municipalities and governments just tend to say like, well, what if it doesn't work? What if it's like, do you mean you're killing people now? Like, look at your current risks. Look at your risks for flooding. Look at your risk for health risks. Look at your congestion, your time savings. Like, those are the risks that you're currently doing. So I propose that this is the lowest possible risk option. Even if you do nothing, this is lower risk than doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is very, very positive. It makes it disruptive, which is, we need that. It's actually quite badly needed. So I predict you're going to be extremely successful globally.
Great. And it's all, I hear this probably at least once a day. All it takes is the first one. It's I've heard that so many times, but it looks like, it is happening, and it's happening in a large scale, because what we're not doing is we're not getting distracted saying like, why don't you do a small systems? Like, no, we understand scale, we understand network effects, and you have to do it big. It's either big or go home. So that's what we're doing, is you do it for an entire region, or just don't bother doing it. There's lots of other places. And a lot of our financing starts at 500 million or $1 billion for projects, because that's how much money is out there. People want to do sustainable infrastructure projects. They're looking for these things. So, and the top leaders of the world should be calling me and saying like, how can we get you to our cities? I expect I should be getting a call from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and PM Prime Minister Modi, and they should be trying to reach me to say like, wow, I have all these issues and you can solve them, and you're not asking for any funding, and you're actually providing us a revenue stream. That sounds too good to be true. It's like, yeah, that's what we're doing, is we're providing
So are you mainly doing marketing offline to municipalities? Like, what level of government are you dealing with?
It's
Any
usually
level?
governors, governors, mayors, or presidents, heads of states. Those are because those are the ones with the vision. They have the vision, but they don't know how they execute on it. And you can't go to the transportation group, because that's all about status quo and maintaining the status quo in their current job. So you really have to hit at the top level of whatever region that you're looking at.
Okay, so your approach is somewhat top down, and that's important. I mean, I look at it from a consumer standpoint quite a lot, and I'm very pleased with what I'm hearing from you on the whole picture. So top down, and I wish you well on gaining access to many of them, and I hope that you find the C-suite team to come in and cover you really well, so that you can actually distribute that technology. Because, frankly, I've been to quite a number of ski resorts, and when they're well covered with the lift system, which is somewhat similar, there's an allegory there a little bit. I find that getting around the whole ski hill is a very pleasurable experience. So that's one of the things that I'm relating to you on as a consumer. I think it's very interesting.
Let me sort of say, so gondolas are really point to point. They're not a network like a road network. They don't have intersections. They can't turn, this is much more like a highway system that's been shrunk down to fit very easily within an urban environment. Yes, the vehicles, yes, our pods are hanging, but that's pretty much the only similarity to, gondolas are low capacity, they're slow, and they are on this fixed conveyor belt that's point to point. You don't.
When you're skiing, you want to have a little bit of space around you. So the low capacity is actually a benefit when you pay for that lift ticket, because you're not crowded, which is, it's like, it's different context. Yeah.
Well, the point is that you want to be able to have a high capacity. Nobody wants to say like, I want to make my technology to only do low capacity. It's like, well, you can always scale it down. You don't, but in order to solve the congestion issue, you have to have high capacity.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
That's really
This is excellent discussion, and definitely our policymakers and the government and our people can understand that how this kind of futuristic technology can be helpful for the emerging economy. And definitely we always love to support this kind of innovations, and research and innovation is our main advocacy for the emerging economy. So we need more support from Madam Viva, Mr. Mike, to continue our advocacy with the government level and the corporation and academy level. Madam Viva, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, I just like to say that, David Smith mentioned that it's going to take a little bit of time. And obviously, I think Mike's encountering that as well, too. It's going to take some time for us to churn our technology over into supporting high air quality, good green space, better things, all the features that people want to have in urban centers. And it's our job to get behind leaders like Mike that are bringing that on board. So, with financing as well as, spreading the word. So I would ask, that Mike share his website again. And my website for the hydroxyl dispersal is www.reductiontech.com. And that's all I have to say at this point for today. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
I'll start by saying public transit is dead. Long live public transit. So that's what I would say, is that your old public transit should die. It will die. That's okay. But there will be a new form that's superior in every way and will get you where you would say, like, I don't want to drive in a car. I want to take a pod, and pods are cool. So that's what I see, is that the future of public transit is very strong, just not what you're used to. So.
And it's
Thank you.
transitx.com, transitx.com.
Yeah, transitx.com, or you can search for proposals in your area too.
Thank you. Thank you. This is excellent discussion. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with corporation and academy. Hopefully through this dialogue, we can take more action in real life and we can uplift more community in emerging economy. Thank you, Madam Viva, and thank you, Mr. Mike, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Hopefully next week we can discuss new topic on transportation system. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.